Welcome to the simple monohybrid genetics cross notes or lecture for the day. You may notice that I'm using an actual camera and using the board, so I know things might be a little blurry, but this is the best way to do genetics problems. I got to show you how to do them, and it's easier to show you how to do them in person like this. So let's begin. The first type of genetics cross that you're going to be dealing with is a simple monohybrid genetics cross. Well, what does that mean? Monohybrid means there's only one characteristic we're going to be dealing with. These are what's called simple crosses, meaning there's only a characteristic that could be there's alleles and genes that could either be dominant, right here, capital B equals tart, for example, or lowercase b, which is recessive, which is bitter. So the example I have given you here is I'm showing you a characteristic like flavor or taste of fruit. And in this case, our phenotype has to do with our characteristic. Genotype has to do with the alleles or the genes that are present. So what do we have here? This is our list of genotypes and phenotypes. So the first genotype possibility that you can have with this kind of genetics cross would be capital B, also known as homozygous and dominant. If someone, or a fruit in this case, has a capital B and a capital B as their genes, well, capital B is tart, it's dominant, they have two of them, so their fruit would taste tart. Okay, now we have another option, capital B and lowercase b, or you can flip it and make it a lowercase b and a capital B, but just so you know, if you're a geneticist, you're doing these kinds of problems, you always will put the capital first. That's a generality. Why? Because the dominant gene covers up the recessive gene in this case. So you generally put the more powerful gene first. But I'm showing you that it could be both ways. It doesn't make it wrong. It just increases your likelihood of making a small mistake. Now, this one is one of each type of gene, a capital and a lowercase. So that is called heterozygous. And in this case, the capital dominates the lowercase. It doesn't matter if you write it backwards. The capital covers up or dominates the lowercase. So that means tart will dominate bitter for a heterozygous person or a heterozygous plant in this case. All right. Finally, our last option is lowercase b, lowercase b. Those are two recessive genes. How do we know? They're lowercase. If they're lowercase, they can get covered up by a dominant. So if you get if a fruit gets two of these lowercase b's, well, two of them would make it bitter. Okay, and that is called homozygous and recessive. All right, so let's do a quick review. You really need to know these terms: heterozygous, homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive. You got to know the terms. I'm going to be using them in the genetics problems. And if you know what they mean, it makes your life that much easier so that you can work out the problem in a much simpler fashion. And if you notice, capital B is tart, capital B lowercase b is tart. So more often than not, you're seeing tart, the dominant characteristics is showing versus the recessive characteristic here. Okay, there's only one way to be recessive, and you have to have two lowercase genes in order to do that. All right, so now let's do a sample problem. Okay, here we go. Now, this is the first sample problem. Okay, so I'm going to go through it with you and break it down. Now, you will not, if you notice, I have parents here, and I have a box here. When you're working out these genetics problems at home, you're going to need a piece of scratch paper, and I'm telling you right now, my biggest tip to you is to put the parents on your genetics crosses. More often than not, students mess up the parents, and then that creates a Punnett square that has a lot of problems. Okay, so ideally, showing the parents will help you not make as many small, simple mistakes when you're doing the square. Okay, so these are simple Punnett squares. We have dominant characteristics. We have recessive characteristics. So let's do the first one together. I'll read it to you guys and explain to you the parts of the problem. The ability for sharks to smell blood is dominant. So smelling blood is dominant. It's going to have a capital letter. Unable to smell blood, well, that gets dominated over, so unable to smell blood is recessive in this case. Okay, so smelling blood, dominant. Okay, unable, recessive in this case. So lowercase, capital letter. If two sharks that are heterozygous for smelling blood mate. So if they're heterozygous, you need to know what that means. That means they have one of each letter. Okay, you can pick your favorite letters. Ideally, pick letters that have a capital and a lowercase that look different than each other. Okay, so you want to do a capital and a lowercase. They look different from each other. You want to make sure they look O, not the best letter to use. X's, you will use them, but only for sex, and that's the very last genetics cross. So letters that look the same, capital and lowercase, not the best letters to use. So let's keep this one simple. Let's use a B because we just used a B in the example. A's and B's are great. C's, not very good. They look the same, okay? So let's use a B because we just used B's, all right? So both sharks are heterozygous. Both parents are heterozygous. So let's give them a heterozygous genotype for both parents, okay? That means mom and dad, heterozygous, right there, okay? Then an organism cannot give their child all of its DNA when we're talking about genetics crosses. An organism's DNA is a mixture of mom and dad's DNA. So if this is mom and that's dad, mom can only give one of those B's, dad can only give one of those B's. So we need to separate them from each other. Okay, this is called the law of segregation. You can't give your kid all of your DNA. You can only give them half of your DNA. So you need to break them apart, and you're going to be putting them on top of the box and on the side of the box. So let me show you how to do that. So let's first start with this parent. One of the capital B's or uppercase B's goes there. The lowercase goes there. It doesn't matter who goes on the top and who goes on the side. It doesn't affect your answers in the end. Then we're going to take the second parent and break them apart. Capital B, lowercase b. So what did we just do? I know there's a glare on the screen. Let's see if I can slide it so it's a little easier to see. Let me slide it up real quick. Let me rewrite it for you guys. All right, now we're back at it. I had to slide it up because I noticed the glare on the screen, okay? So then the ones on the top come down and the ones on the sides come over. You generally will put a capital or uppercase letter first because that is the dominant gene. So in this first box, a capital B comes down, capital B comes over. This box, the capital B comes down, the lowercase b goes there. Over here, uppercase B there, lowercase, lowercase, lowercase. All right? The question says, what is the probability they will have an offspring that can smell blood? Well, according to this, smelling blood is dominant. This one right here has a dominant gene, at least one. That one can smell blood. That one can smell blood. That one can smell blood. This one cannot smell blood. So the probability would be 1, 2, 3 out of 4 can smell blood. Okay, now let's do number 2. I'm going to erase this one, slide it up, and we'll do the second problem. All right, here's the second problem. Okay, let me read it to you guys and we'll talk about the problem because this is basically, it's a word problem for the most part. In a certain type of mouse, dark coat dominates. So dark coat, capital letter, a cream coat. So if it dominates over it, that means cream coat is recessive. Lowercase, capital letter, okay, uppercase. A heterozygous dark coat male. So we know that the male mouse is heterozygous. Let's use the letter D this time. So this is heterozygous right there. One capital, lowercase. And then I say to you, is mated with a cream female. And cream is our recessive characteristic. So the female has to be all lowercase. That's the only way to show cream color. Okay? You take them, law of segregation, you separate them apart. You cannot give your offspring all of your DNA. It is half your DNA. So let's first split up the first parent, put them up here. There's the uppercase, there's a lowercase. Then over here, let's bring these to the side, lowercase, lowercase. Okay? Those ones come down, those ones come over. All right? This is what your Punnett square should look like. Once you've made your Punnett square, and once you have your parents, you make your Punnett square, now you can answer the question. So let's do that. What is the chance they will have a dark-coated mouse? Well, these two are dark. How do we know? Dark is dominant. They have one of the dominant genes. So these two are dark. So out of 4, that is 2 out of 4. 2 out of 4 is a reduced fraction of 1/2. Okay. What is the probability they will have a cream-coated mouse? Oh, look, these two are cream. That's 2 out of 4. That is also 1/2. And last one, what is the probability they will have a homozygous dominant mouse? Homozygous dominant means both of your genes are capitals or uppercase letters. We don't have any of those. That answer will be 0. All right. That concludes the sample problems for the simple monohybrid genetics crosses.